shouldn't we have a more societal discussion, an ethical discussion about the implication of the digitalization, for instance, for the employees of our companies, for people who are, not part of this digital society? So for the implication about privacy, about the right of forgiveness in the internet. So how do you look on what is needed to have another ethical debate about the implication of digitalization?
So this is a great question, and this is one of the most important things that we try to focus on at Singularity University. When I look out in the world at people, where are the ethical conversations actually happening? The only place you really hear people talking about ethics are politicians, religious leaders, academic ethicists, or sometimes in a coffee house in Paris and sometimes in Berlin, right? Most of those are actually not productive. They're not able to figure out how do we decide whether we should have drones flying around outside and could potentially be looking through the windows. Who decides that? And right now, the regulatory bodies that are deciding these things, they're not considering sort of long-term ethical considerations or the impacts on society. And so our approach is to bring all those different groups together. Every forum we bring together, we really try to have entrepreneurs, corporates, governments, nonprofit groups, other academic groups, as well as finance and economic leaders. And when you get those 6 groups together, with also the diversity of geographic representation, gender representation, you get artists and you get technical people all together. You get a diversity of thought that I think really is not found anywhere. And then you inspire them to think about technology at a different pace. And now let's have a conversation about where this takes the world. And the types of conversations are so rich and powerful that they usually bring those back and try to figure out how to inject them into the government and other.
As a consequence, do you believe that the way how markets, how society is regulated, how the legislation is organized, this is going to change dramatically or has to change dramatically?
Yeah, it definitely has to change. Our infrastructure, our systems, our economic models, they were set up hundreds and thousands of years ago when technology was moving very slow and very linearly. It was actually moving exponentially. It was just on the sort of flat part of the curve. And there's no way those systems can keep up with an exponential progress, right? In fact, you see in every industry, in every regulatory body, just completely reacting to the things that are happening around them, right? So something has to shift. One major challenge today that we have is even if a regulatory body decides, you know what, we should stop this. So in the U.S., during the George W. Bush era, he had an ethical concern, a moral concern about embryonic stem cells. And so we regulated. We stopped all research in the United States around embryonic stem cells. Now, did that stop that research? No. It moved to China, it moved to Brazil and some other places. And the biotech sector in China boomed. And the U.S. lost the perspective and the visibility into all that research and what's happening. The same thing is occurring today. Genetic engineering. Genetically engineering designer babies or something like that is not going to happen in Germany anytime soon. Sure not going to happen in the U.S. anytime soon. I bet it happens in China and a few other places. So how do we as a global society come together to grapple with this thing? Because we're talking now about the future of humanity, right? So who's in control of that? Who should be discussing and dictating where that goes? And for me, I think what we saw at the COP21 in Paris around environmental concerns, what we did with biotech in the 80s with the Asilomar conferences is about bringing the scientists and thought leaders together to have these ethical conversations. It's not about regulation necessarily.